Welcome back, and here we are. This is the memorandum sent out to teams, and let's see, this goes to the NHL Board of Governors, General Managers, Team Presidents, Club Medical Directors, Head Athletic Directors, NHL Club Head Equipment Managers, and Players. And so I'm going to go through this with you. Phased return to sport protocol. The health of player and club personnel is the league's top priority as it relates to adoption of preventative measures to help protect against contraction of COVID-19, as well as procedures regarding detection of infection and transmission of said COVID-19. It is also important that players have an appropriate opportunity for proper conditioning prior to any resumption of gameplay. So that, of course, means safety is important and getting players in shape before they start playing again. A range of clinical scenarios exist, from very mild to fatal outcome. This protocol, while very comprehensive, cannot mitigate all risk. It generally affects older age groups and those with previously existing medical conditions, more so than younger and otherwise healthy individuals. We recognize players and personnel have family and household members who may fall into the vulnerable categories. Now, Section B here of the first section. It is recognized that relaxation of travel and shelter-in-place requirements may differ between countries and regions where players are currently living and where they'll be returning to for their club activities. Clubs should help to shall facilitate. That doesn't work. Who proofread this? Clubs should help to shall facilitate? No. Clubs shall facilitate player travel arrangements to the extent permitted to enable players who are not in the club's home city to return to the club's home city as each player may deem appropriate in order to facilitate their ability to engage in Phase 2 activities. To the extent travel and shelter-in-place restrictions impede the ability of your players to return to your club's home city, please notify one of us so that the league stays informed on the challenges each club may be facing in this regard. Players who do not maintain permanent residences in the club city, including AHL players, shall be provided separate hotel accommodations for the duration of their participation in the club's Phase 2 activities. So this is where AHL players who've been told, hey, stay on pause. You guys are still going to be part of this. This is where they're mentioned. Including family-appropriate accommodation if their families are accompanying the player. Players without permanent residences in the club city shall also be provided with or reimbursed for the cost of a rental car during the duration of Phase 2. Accommodations must be of the same high quality provided to players during the regular season. The hotel or other accommodations shall satisfy the hygiene, distancing, cleaning, and disinfecting requirements recommended by the club's medical professionals, including its infectious disease consultant. Players who are returning to their club city from the location where they were self-quarantining during Phase 1 will be reimbursed for reasonable travel expenses incurred, in so doing a maximum of $1,500 US. AHL players will be reimbursed for all reasonable expenses incurred in traveling to the club city or chosen alternate location. Prior to the resumption of small group activities, some individuals, players, and permitted personnel traveling back to the club's home city may be required to serve a 14-day self-quarantine imposed by local health authorities, regardless of their mode of travel. That's where Canada comes in. So the 14-day self-quarantine means that if you're in Canada and you're going, why isn't a Canadian city? Yep, Canadian cities are still in this. Because the 14-day self-quarantine is mostly a Canadian thing. Guidelines for the designation of high-risk environments will be provided to clubs by the NHL in consultation with the NHLPA as soon as practicable. However, clubs are not permitted to require that players who are currently sheltering in place outside of the club's home city return to the home city so they can complete a quarantine in time to participate in Phase 2. All of this is voluntary. Keep in mind, this is voluntary. Players shall avoid carpooling together from one location to the club's home city. To the extent such carpooling occurs, post-travel quarantine for individuals involved shall be considered at the club's direction. Carpools, it's one of those things that I guess. It's one of the, I've seen it here where they've said, well, we're blaming it on the carpooling, and I think maybe, but there was other things in there too. An overriding principle Testing of asymptomatic players and club personnel must be done in the context of excess testing capacity so as not to deprive healthcare workers, vulnerable populations, and symptomatic individuals from necessary diagnostic tests. Meaning, they're not taking a test from you should you need it. You're not going to go in and here, oh, sorry, you had the last test, Claude Giroux just had it. That's not going to happen. Secondly, why is Giroux getting it? Testing by its nature is for the early detection of infection and is not replacement for the hygiene, distancing, cleaning, and disinfecting methods outlined in this framework that can help prevent infection in the first instance. And that gets into the laboratory stuff. Clubs shall make arrangements, shall administer PCR testing to all players and club personnel with player access prior to the resumption of Phase 2 training activities. If testing is not available at the start of Phase 2, players who wish to participate in Phase 2 activities must self-quarantine for 14 days prior to entering the facility, or certify they've already served a self-quarantine for the prior 14 days in the club's home market, in which event they will be eligible to enter the facility when Phase 2 begins. Temperature and system checks. So each club shall establish a process to record symptoms and conduct temperature checks on a daily basis, not more than 2 hours prior to each players and club personnel with players' accesses entry to the club facility. These checks shall be self-administered at the homes of the player and club personnel with player access prior to the departure for the club's facility. The temperature checks have been used a lot over in Asia, and they seem to help. Reported temperature of above 99.5 degrees Fahrenheit or 37.5 degrees Celsius. So yeah, this is a club screening process, and if somebody gets sick or you record a high temperature. Additionally, each club must administer a separate temperature and symptom check at the entrance of the club facility before any player or personnel with player access shall be allowed to enter. So that's a not negotiable part. Temperature checks for education center or education sessions. So we're into section E. It'd be fun to know people are reading along with this. This is available through the NHL's PR department. Prior to the start of Phase 2, the club's medical director and head athletic director shall conduct a remote education meeting for the players, player access personnel, and no player access club personnel to provide education regarding COVID-19, including the Phase 2 protocol, potential risks associated with involvement in Phase 2 or subsequent phases. Legal provide clubs with a template PowerPoint. They're still using PowerPoint? That's sad. To be used with these, I never liked PowerPoint. I know when I worked at the call center, I'd be like, can you do a PowerPoint? No. It's easy, I know. I don't want to do it. The above educational content shall be developed in consultation with the NHLPA. So again, this is NHL and NHLPA working together. All players must undergo a pre-participation medical evaluation and Exhibit 25A clearance prior to participating in any Phase 2 activities. So this is really PPME shall include at a minimum medical history review and focused examination, orthopedic history review and focused examination, ECG, post cardiac questionnaire and investigation based on a checklist that will be provided. It'll be determined whether persons sharing a home with a person being evaluated currently have symptoms or have tested positive or otherwise at high risk or severe illness. Anyone confirmed or suspecting shall have further investigation and high sensitivity troponin at the discretion of the club physician consultant with a cardiologist. The following are not required but may be done on a case-by-case basis: eye examination, concussion testing, lab, and other investigations. Due to the close contact required, routine dental examination is not recommended. Symptomatic persons during Phase 2. During Phase 2, anyone who develops symptoms shall immediately notify club medical staff. As such, shall self-isolate and shall be medically evaluated by the club's physician, who shall consult with the club's infectious disease specialist to determine the next steps. So we're into Section G here. And administer PCR testing if appropriate. If in the event a player is diagnosed positive, the club physician shall issue an Exhibit 25A designated the player is unfit to play. The player shall be deemed to have sustained an illness arising out of the course of his employment as a hockey player for such period as he may be removed from training, practice, or play. All players and club personnel shall immediately notify club staff if he or she suspects coming into contact with someone who's had that. The following are common: cough, shortness of breath, chest pain, feverish, chills, muscle pain, not exercise related, New loss of smell or taste. That's the one that really alarms people. Like, how do you smell or taste? Gastrointestinal symptoms, which are nausea, vomiting, and all that other fun stuff. Sinus, cold-like symptoms, and fever. Club medical staff, in consultation with club's infectious disease specialists, shall direct the care of anyone who tests positive. Players, however, shall remain entitled to consult with their personal physicians during the participation in Phase 2. Contact tracing shall be conducted by the club immediately upon a positive result. Shall be in conjunction with and pursuant to regulations from local health authorities. In Phase 2, environment of strict monitoring, testing if applicable, regular cleaning and disinfecting, and adherence to the measures of this protocol, subject to any applicable local health regulations. It's not anticipated that an isolated case would necessitate wide-scale quarantining of a club. However, testing of players in the same players' training session and player access club personnel may be appropriate as determined by club medical staff. Club personnel are asked to test to notify Bill daily if they become aware of players or club or other arena personnel who test positive during Phase 2. The league thereafter shall promptly notify the NHLPA of positive results. So now we've got to it. So now we're up to 11 minutes. I apologize for the length of this. It's going to go on for a bit, but it's worth looking at. This is what people are mad about. This is what people have got mad about, and I wanted to go through and read it. I don't want to just go through somebody's headline and go, I'm mad too. The idea that if a player tests positive, everything gets shut down. Well, no. See, they're going to be training in very small groups. There's going to be distancing in those small groups. The idea that if one player tests positive during Phase 2, you don't have to shut the whole thing down makes some sense to me. Because if one player tests positive in a workplace here, you don't shut the entire business down. That's not something that we've seen locally. It has to be, you know, a full-on, okay, now there's 5, there's 6, there's 7. Okay, now we got a problem. Players are going to be in small groups in Phase 2. Permitted activities. So now we're into Phase 2, Section H here. Player-only non-contact skates. No coaches, skating coaches, other club employees, or club contracted representatives may participate in any on-ice session. So for people who've said, what about coaches and all this? They're not going to be on the ice. Just players go out on the ice, and it's no contact. On-ice time shall be divided equally between the skaters within each small group. Goaltenders may be provided additional ice time. When players are not participating in on-ice activities, they'll be permitted under club's exercise and weight room equipment. They'll be permitted to utilize the club's exercise and weight room equipment or receive individual treatment from the club's medical training staff. Weight training does not include the need for a spotter. So, exercise by yourself. Circuit-based activities such as resistance training, cardiovascular exercises, endurance training, and rehabilitation and treatment for players with ongoing disabling injuries and for players with non-disabling injuries may be provided as directed by club medical training staff. They're not permitted to work out or skate at any public facility or other location. So as public rinks open up, nope, not allowed. May not organize any player skates or group skates outside of the training sessions organized by the club. So they can't just say, all right, we'll get 6 of us together and go here. No. Where are you going? No, the NHL is saying no. Coaches and hockey operations personnel will be permitted to observe but not participate in the player-only non-contact skates, commencing on the later of the date on which the commencement of training camp is announced by the league or 2 weeks after the club's commencement of Phase 2 activities. So there you go. And then it gets into permitted personnel, 1 athletic trainer, 1 strength conditioning coach, 1 equipment manager, one or two dressing room attendants, club physician, 1 goalie coach. For the duration of Phase 2, players shall remain in the same small group, basically 6 players, so that any infection or exposure that might occur will be contained within that group in order to facilitate contact tracing. So again, it's only in small groups. We're not saying, well, if a whole team is sick, they'll just go on the ice. Club training, club operations personnel, club business staff. Non-permitted staff. The following individuals are prohibited from entering the club facilities during Phase 2. Media, player agents, massage therapists, chiropractors, player performance personnel, player family members, any other persons. So, I don't see Gritty on there, so I guess Gritty could be at the Philadelphia facility, right? It's possible. I don't think he needs one of these. I think he's... Alright. Social distancing. Players and player access club personnel shall maintain 6-foot physical distance. from each other at all times while in and outside of the club facilities. Players shall be discouraged from socializing with one another in close contact while at or outside of the club's facilities. The only exception to social distancing restrictions while in the club facility would be medical encounters, one-on-one treatment with an athletic therapist, physical examinations of a player where physical distancing cannot be employed. So again, that's why when one player tests positive or two tests positive, you don't have to shut it all down, because as long as players are staying apart from one another, as long as there's some safety in there, it doesn't mean that, Billy got sick. Well, shut the whole thing down. Stupid Billy. In addition to maintaining social distancing while from one another at all times, the following measures shall be adopted. Face coverings shall be worn at all times other than while exercising, when entering or leaving the club facility. So yeah, masks are going to be required. Not required to wear face coverings when they're exercising or on the ice. So that's something that had been asked, and I'm curious as to how they're going to do the safety thing during games. But this is just phase 2. Local health regulations will require players to wear PPE while exercising in phase 2. Clubs shall inquire whether an exemption can be attained or contact the league to evaluate alternative options. So some local health may say, though, they have to wear face masks, and so while they're exercising. So not necessarily on the ice, but while they're exercising in a gym environment, and then the league will take a look at that. Strength conditioning, commuting. Players shall avoid carpooling or taking public transportation to the club's facility, including ride shares and taxis. If no other alternative is feasible, the club shall make arrangements to pick up and drop off the player at his residence, and all such drivers must wear gloves and a face mask covering. Use of hot and cold tubs, as well as saunas and steam rooms, are prohibited. So there's no saunas available, not allowed. You only hear that on this channel, is my guess. Any team that provides practice gear for its players shall establish a process that promotes safe, secure distribution of clean gear and the collection of used gear for prompt cleaning before the player's next session. Players must use water bottles and lids that are permanently marked with their player number or other means of identification. So we're all kids again. That's great. Clubs shall not provide meals for shared consumption at the club facility. Club's catering staff may provide prepackaged meals in individual containers for each player to be picked up while the player's at the facility. Prepackaged meals may not be consumed at the club's facility and shall be taken home and consumed at the player's residence. Only single-use beverages or snacks, i.e. granola or power bars, may be provided and consumed at the club's facility. Wash hands frequently with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Sing happy birthday twice. If soap and water are not readily available, use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer must be made readily available to all players and club personnel, and then it gets into where they are. When to wash your hands. Cleaning and disinfecting. During phase 2, the cleaning must be completed prior to reopening any club facility on shared circuit-based training equipment between each player usage, and that's disinfectant wipe down. As an example, between small group training sessions on all areas and equipment that are touched, and at the end of each day. So Group A leaves the ice before Group B gets on the ice. Everything's disinfected and cleaned. Further, if the area of the club facility, players or player access club personnel, washrooms, training equipment, kitchen is accessed by no player access club personnel during hours when the players... this is just so wordy. You can tell lawyers come up with this. Activities outside of the club facilities. Outside of the individual training, it is important that all club personnel, including players, continue to adhere to personal precautions recommended by the CDC, as well as additional direction that may be issued by your local health authority and club medical staff. Shall continue to stay at home as much as possible and practical, and must avoid unnecessary interactions with non-family members. Players shall not physically spend time together in close comfort. As noted above, players participating in Phase 2 are not permitted to work out or skate at any public facility or location, except as may be permitted by the club, and may not organize any player skates or group skates outside of the small group sessions organized by the club. And they get into club facilities, and a lot of this does get really kind of repetitive, and it has to. It's recognized that a one-size-fits-all may not be practical in all situations. If you believe that you can meet the goals and functions of this protocol in a different manner, you may contact Bill Daly or Julie Grand at the league, who will consult with the NHLPA and medical consultants to consider whether an exception for a specific item herein and approval of an alternative is appropriate. And then they get into all of the disinfectants and which agents are effective, hand cleaners, bench areas, Both home and visiting team benches must have vertical dividers in the water bottle tray at sufficient intervals to keep the bottles from falling over. Both home and visiting team benches must be properly cleaned and disinfected before each use between periods during games. Includes flooring, bench surface, top of dasher boards, water bottle storage area, and glass. On ice, officials will utilize their own water bottle or Aquafina bottle. Aquafina's right in there, so that's some good product placement right there. Transportation, charter airlines. So they get into how they're going to get there, how they're going to go home. And then issued by Infection Control Subcommittee. A whole bunch of doctors on there. Disinfectant checklist requirements and form. Oh, nice. And they give you the disinfectant checklist form. Very nice. And it's date, time, home and visiting team dressing room disinfected, officials room disinfected, coaches room disinfected, confirmed by, and print your name. And you got to send that in. I used to fill that kind of stuff out for first aid. That's interesting. And then there you go. That's page 21, and that's it. So here's a quick run through. So when you hear that this is the worst plan ever and it's not safe and they're not taking safety seriously, I really at this point think it's just alarmists. I do, and I'm being serious. I think it's just people who just want to alarm everybody. This league is absolutely terrible, and they're trying to get everybody sick. Keep in mind they've been closed since March. So, phase 2 document, we got through it. Took us about 20 minutes. Hopefully you get the document, read it through for yourself. I read through what I felt was important for us to know as fans, to know that, yes, players and coaches, everybody's going to be kept separate. The draft lottery is apparently on June 26th. Yeah, the draft lottery is going to happen on June 26th. I've seen this through numerous sources. Apparently that's what's going to be announced officially soon. And apparently teams that are on the play-in may very well qualify for the lottery. So Montreal could win the lottery and the Stanley Cup. Just think about that. Or Chicago could win the lottery and the Stanley Cup. Here's your Stanley Cup. You go on the play-in, and then you won 4 rounds. And here's Alexis Lafreniere. And now we're going to go outside and find a bunch of very angry, not socially distant fans who are demanding answers. Now, the Carolina Hurricanes, Jordan Martinook has come out and said that they're not in favor of the play-in round. So the reason that he voted no is they don't like the play-in round. Now, you can take that 2 ways, and we've taken this both ways, which is they don't want to have to spend that extra round qualifying for the playoffs, or they don't want to play the Rangers. And either or, to me, works. This is a team that I understand why they don't like it. But they've also said they're supportive of it, and they want to finish the season. So Jordan Martinook said all the players want to finish the season. They want to come back. All players he's talked to. And so this was not a we're not coming back because it's not safe situation. Again, what I just read you guys is only phase 2. That's not when we're going to start playing hockey. New York has reopened their facilities. It's interesting because now we're starting to see like sports facilities being open in locations that I don't think the NHL is going to look at. I don't think New York's going to be on the radar. That being said, if the 14-day quarantine in Canada is a tripping point, because they want phase 2 to start in early June. They don't have a date yet for it, but they want it to start in early June. If we're in a situation where they look at Canada, they look at the States and go, Canada's got a better rate of all of this, and Canada's got it under control, but the States, it's easier for us to work there. I'll be interested to see what they do. I would kind of understand if they went with the American side of it, but at the same time, it's going to be very interesting to see what they do. And of course, teams will start trying to get players out of Europe back into North America as soon as possible. In the States, that's a possible thing that they can do right away. In Canada, that's going to require I don't know. I don't know what the regulations being as they are right now. I don't know where NHL players fit in. Are they considered essential? Are they considered like seasonal workers that still are coming over from overseas to work here? I don't know. We'll see. Now, LA is apparently potentially a hub city as well, which has residents there wondering how that works since they're still kind of locked down. So, yeah, this is one of those things where we're going to see in some locations some odd. This is odd. In LA, it's odd because, of course, California, so it's odd. Not Florida odd. Not like, a crocodile being on the ice kind of odd. And I'm aware they're alligators, but if it was a crocodile, we go, well, yeah, but it's Florida. But it is a hard sell if you're the governor to say, well, everybody should stay home and we're going to have all the sports here. So sports are a huge generator of revenue in the state of California. So I don't think they're going to get an NHL agreement to be a hub city. I think if they go with 4, I think it'll probably be Vegas, Vancouver, Edmonton, and either Columbus or Toronto. That would be my guess, but again, it seems to change all the time, and maybe LA gets in there. You need to have a facility to play in that is close to hotels, so there is as little travel as possible. One thing that's also been coming out about this is that NHL players don't want to be away from their families, and there is a good chance that they can bring their family with them, but their family also has to isolate. So then their family is involved in that extended quarantine as well. And that's something that we're going to see some interesting decisions being made between now and when there's a return. Dmitry Timashov, who was claimed on waivers by Detroit. There were rumors coming out of Russia that he might be going home. And his reps are denying it, saying that he is not going to be signing in the KHL. He intends to play in the NHL. And so we'll see what happens with that. And then on a final note for today, construction has begun on the Belmont Arena, which is supposed to open in time for the 2021-2022 season. And we'll see whether or not that does actually happen on time. Both the season and the construction of the arena, and how this is all going to affect Seattle. I would love to do a video on how this is all going to affect Seattle. I have no idea. We're still too far out to really know. But we know that the draft lottery is pushed back to June 26th. All the player contracts are going to slide. Bonuses are all going to slide. That's already been talked about, basically agreed upon by the NHLPA and the NHL itself. And we'll see what happens from here. But there you go. So phase 2, let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. And I'll talk to you again soon.